The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, offering assisted living and compass memory support with evidence-based treatment for those with memory loss. More at armbrookvillage.com.
This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. I'm Carrie Saldo. It's Friday, July 12th, 2024. Our crew dishing on the news you can use this week: Jim Kinney, a reporter with the Springfield Republican; East Hampton Mayor Nicole LaChapelle; and NEPM reporter Alden Brown. Good morning, everyone.
Hey there.
Coming up, we'll discuss what's up with legal weed. Later, a look at what makes our downtowns tick. And you there, dear listeners, should email us your favorite downtown destination. You can do that at therundown@nepm.org. That's therundown@nepm.org. In this week's local look at national news that will impact the 413, Mass Live's Treya Lavery wrote a piece with the headline, "Mass Democrats Give Biden Their Reluctant Support Ahead of the Democratic National Convention Coming Up in August." Despite calls for President Biden to drop his bid for the White House, the majority of Massachusetts pledged Democratic delegates say they plan to support him at the August convention. East Hampton Mayor Nicole LaChapelle, you're one of those delegates, and you were on a call with President Biden this week, along with some other mayors. You said in an email statement following that call, quote, you appreciated his candor and clear vision. Now, for many who saw the debate 2 weeks ago, they complained that Biden didn't present a clear vision for his future plans of the country. So what vision did he make clear to you on that call?
I mean, the vision he made clear was he knows where Main Street is. Over the last 4 years, he has delivered dollars and programs to the main streets of the Pioneer Valley cities and towns unequivocally. And the vision going forward was how he was going to continue to give relief to Main Street and tackle some of the biggest issues that affect my constituents, including prices of food. And looking at the price of egg and milk and taking legal action against these food conglomerates. And that really caught my attention. Before and after the call, before and after the debate, there's no question in my mind. I am going to uphold what I signed on to, which is support of Biden-Harris tickets unequivocally.
We'll dig into that more in a bit. But Jim Kinney, last week you reported that Representative Richard Neal and Governor Maura Healey, you checked in with them about these issues. Neal thinks Biden should stay in. I think his quote was, "I'm with Joe." Governor Healey, she hedged a bit, as many have, saying, he should really consider carefully whether to stay in. I'm obviously paraphrasing there. U.S. Representative Jim McGovern, who represents part of our region, as we all know, told the fabulous 413 on Thursday that he's not ready to say whether he thinks Joe Biden should drop out of the race for president. Here's exactly what he said.
But I'm going to keep my powder dry until I think it's the appropriate time to be more public about it. I want to give him the grace and the space to get out on his own if that's what he chooses to do. But I want to figure out, how do we fix this? And I haven't quite figured that out yet.
Jim, Alden, my observation, McGovern isn't typically one to hold back what he thinks. Are you surprised that he's kind of waiting here?
Yeah. I think the concern is that the focus is so hyper on Biden's performance that Biden can't take the fight to Trump. If he can't call the guy out, the focus is always going to be on every little tick, every odd sideways glance from Biden, and not on the substance. And it hampers taking the fight to the other side.
And that seems like a position we've been hearing from more and more Democrats, where they're not saying we're 100% in favor of him staying in the race, but we think it's up to him and he should make the right decision, which seems to be leaving the door open for him withdrawing potentially, I think.
As I mentioned before, Mayor LaChapelle, you are an elected delegate to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago next month. Vox Media, I think, vying for the most clickbaity headline of the week, ran a story, "Is it undemocratic to replace Biden on the ticket?" But I do want to quote a piece of that reporting. And they said, quote, "Should the votes of 15 million people who voted in Democratic primaries earlier this year be the be-all, end-all for what represents, quote, democracy? Perhaps the party deliberating over and choosing a different option is its own form of democracy in action? And what about the 150 million or so people who may vote in the fall, most of whom polling suggests have concerns about Biden's age and would prefer a different Democratic nominee? Should their views matter? What do you think, Mayor LaChapelle?
I do think it would be undemocratic for the party to have or push Joe Biden to step aside. I do agree with Jim. If he so chooses, then it's his decision. But we all voted. There was a process. It's a well-established process. And I think the twist, maybe looking back a little bit through the emotion and drama, is we've had other Democratic nominees that really were harshly treated by the system that put them forward. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, really looking at Mondale, Carter. So the tenor is certainly connected to something different than those past races, but the insistence is still there, and I find that very interesting. People have forgotten that.
I mean, I think the question is, whether it's undemocratic or not. This is a point raised by Nate Silver, the pollster, about whether what happened at the debate represents fresh information for delegates to consider and see what happened in that debate.
Well, go ahead.
In the old days, they didn't decide a nominee until the convention. You read about these long multi-ballot dramas.
Yeah, and now in this 2024 election, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. We will obviously see with the Democrats. But speaking of the conventions, the Republicans are gearing up for their 2024 convention, which kicks off in Milwaukee on Monday. Candidate and former President Donald Trump, obviously the presumptive GOP nominee there. Photojournalist Barry Goldstein will be there for NEPM. He's working on a multimedia reporting series called Red in a Blue State. You can check out our website, nepm.org, for details on that. Going to move us along here to some other reporting of the week. What's up with legal weed? Belchertown State Representative Aaron Saunders says, quote, "It's a train wreck." We'll get into the whys of that in a bit, but as we sort out the bud from the stem here, it's time for another round of the Rundown Pun Downs. I'm going to slip in as many topic-related puns as I can during our discussion, and listeners, you can get in touch with us with the correct number of puns, and we will send you something fun. The email, therundown@nepm.org. Chris Lazinski of the State House News Service reporting here. Lawmakers signaled Tuesday that they share a government watchdog's concerns about the upheaval at the Cannabis Control Commission, but they've not rolled out a plan for response. It seems problems at the CCC are at an all-time high, weeks after Inspector General Jeffrey Shapiro came out and called the commission, quote, rudderless. Members of the legislature's Cannabis Policy Committee dove into his findings. Let's get into the weeds here, folks. What's been happening? Inspector General Jeffrey Shapiro described a long list of concerns at Tuesday's hearings, among them sudden resignations of staff and turnover at the CCC, an inadvertent release of some sensitive data, a delay in changing a two-driver policy months after commissioners voted to change it, among others. Mayor LaChapelle, East Hampton, home to several different recreational marijuana dispensaries. Any word on how this current state of the CCC is hitting them?
Oh, I mean, how it's hitting the city. Let's start there. And the relationship between the cities and our established dispensaries. New language requirements from the CCC that are really not connected to legislative intent or realistic operations on either side. In one of the pieces you sent us in preparation in Windsor.
Berkshire Eagle reporting, yeah.
What a great story. And when I read it through, I said, maybe East Hampton's not that far behind.
Just real quick, the nut of that story is Windsor's a very small town, about 800 people. The new changes that you spoke to, mostly around equity, Windsor is concerned. They are open to recreational marijuana. It could be established in Windsor. They had one candidate very early on. They withdrew, so they don't have anything. And it's mostly volunteers in a small town running government there. And they're concerned that they can't keep up with these changes.
And I think they're right. I mean, we have run into that with our small staff. And when you talk about social equity and you look at what states surrounding us have done, they're really great models. I feel that somewhere like East Hampton, we could meet, if not exceed, the social equity requirements. And I I take issue with the word requirements. You can get there with a healthy ecosystem. The barriers for social equity, I feel very strongly, are at the state level and created by the CCC since their existence.
Because this was a huge push in the run-up to legalizing marijuana, was this idea that it had disproportionately impacted people of color, and we were going to help those folks get a foothold in this game, and it really hasn't happened in any large sense. Some of the root of the problems that the IG also pointed to, taking equity out and zooming out a bit, the law that created the Cannabis Controls Commission, he said, was self-contradictory and provides no clear guidance on who's responsible for leading the agency. So we've seen a lot of turmoil there. There's almost none of the leadership staff currently in place at the CCC, so state lawmakers are kind of questioning who's running stuff. And I think that's part of what led to Rep. Saunders saying, quote, "I don't know what the legal or legislative parlance is, but it's a train wreck. What's going on right now is not fair to the public. It's not fair to the members of the industry. It's not fair to employees of the commission." I maybe would have gone pun versus metaphor. It's a really sticky situation, but Alden, what are you thinking?
I mean, I thought what the Inspector General highlighted, one of the key things that he highlighted is that the enabling statute that created the CCC basically gave the same powers to the commission chair and the executive director, and he saw that as a huge problem, and so that's why he's calling for a potential receiver to take this over. But that would have to happen. The legislature would need to do that by July 31st.
Actually, late last night, the Senate did weigh in and said they're not going to opt for that receiver, which, as you point out, the IG said that would be a great interim step. Do you think it's because receivership hasn't worked for schools, Jim, that the Senate said, receivers and the CCC not the way to go, or is it more complicated than that?
It's a big step, and you bring in a receiver, you lose all the staff that you do retain, if you do retain anybody, basically go back to square one. And one of the things that I haven't seen in the reporting is we've been hearing about the possibility of on-site consumption, the cafes, for a long, long time. And that's never happened.
Mayor LaChapelle.
That's a huge concern, Jim. I mean, as far as economic development and as well as opening this industry truly to anybody who wants to participate, social consumption is a really big part of that. And we have been waiting and hoping in East Hampton for years. And what's going on at the CCC now is just delaying that. And that's a really important part of social equity as well as innovation and entrepreneurship. I'm very frustrated that has taken so long.
And for people who might not be aware, the social consumption phrase really speaks to this idea that there would be bars or venues where you could come and legally consume legally purchased cannabis. And it's a less, as I understand, the overhead is not as onerous for opening a site like that as opposed to a dispensary where you have to worry about where am I going to get my product, and there's a lot involved expense-wise, right?
Yes, and I mean, there's a whole black-gray market around social consumption items, past chocolate with cannabis that you can buy in a dispensary now, breads, sauces, there are cannabis dinners happening. And to have that onto the legal market, one, for the workers who are doing that work, but also for sales tax, that's a great source of revenue and economic stability, and we're missing out on it.
And I think that's a great point in all of this, too. This is not a small industry. The numbers I looked at, $7 billion. And this is a relatively new industry, too, when you think about it, right? And I was also thinking about the fact that it's something we all kind of cooked up in our heads. The lawmakers made this thing happen. But do you think there's perhaps a road that we could look to, like Colorado, Washington, some of those states that legalized first? I wonder, I don't know if they're having similar issues. Could we take a lead from them?
Certainly. I think that there are lessons learned and lessons to be gained. In particular, what New Jersey did with a very comprehensive piece of legislation that covered everything from dispensaries, medical, and social consumption is worth an eyeball at. Their focus or structure of government includes more of county, which I think we'd have to keep in mind. But I am very interested to see what New Jersey's rollout has been. and what maybe we learn about it in Massachusetts.
Clearly, more work to be done on this entire issue. One other thing that the IG, Jeffrey Shapiro, said, long-term solution. The short-term one, obviously, probably won't go anywhere. The Senate has said no to that idea of the receiver. But longer term, he's saying revamp the commission structure to delineate roles of the commission chair and the executive director. Any thoughts on where this goes from here? Does fixing these issues need to become more of a joint effort, not just lawmakers?
You're going to have to do something. You said it's a $7 billion a year, $7 billion industry. There's a lot of customers. There's a lot of employees. I think the political pressure to do something is starting to really grow. The question is what?
Yeah. Well, there's still more to come on the rundown of artificial intelligence development. Might not be something that leaps to mind when you think of Western Mass, but could it be? Plus, a look at what makes our downtowns tick and predictions, scoops, and praise coming up from our newsroom. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Rundown. The panel still chitty-chatting here as we come back in. I'm Carrie Saldo, delving into the week's news highlights from Western Mass with Jim Kinney, East Hampton Mayor Nicole LaChapelle, and Alden Bourne, both reporters. If you have a question or a comment, chime in via email, therundown@nepm.org. Western Massachusetts, as you're hearing from the music, has no shortage of charming, iconic New England downtowns. Many with buildings that date back well over 100 years. And, there's at least one person, and maybe it's even you, who can look around and point to a building and say, oh, that was Woolworths. Hey, that store where the Newberries used to be, or remember Faces in Northampton? And recent reporting from Jim Kinney, centered, in fact, on Northampton. The headline here, Northampton's downtown entices despite many empty storefronts and transitioning businesses. Now, there's lots of businesses in Northampton's downtown, but also, as you pointed out in your reporting, Jim, at least a dozen vacancies. 5-10 years ago, I think that probably we would have never imagined that many. What's driving this transition?
Well, one of the things I heard from a number of people, including the people who own and manage Thorne's Marketplace, is it's sort of a generational transition. That Northampton that you talked about that was full, that was started by baby boomer entrepreneurs who went in the 70s, 80s, and maybe early 90s, and now those folks are moving on. In one case, the gentleman with Acme passed away.
Which was a huge, they have several thousand feet of square footage in that space.
And it was a great fun draw to Thorne's. So now they're kind of going through this transition in a different retail economy where you're fighting Amazon, you're fighting inflation, you're fighting a lot of other social changes.
Yeah, and Brenna Ryan, who owns Make Time Framing, she was the person who brought that up in your reporting, basically encouraging people to get off their phones, get off their computers, and come on out and shop local. But that's been the eternal push-pull for so many people. Mayor LaChapelle, East Hampton, what's going on in your downtown scene?
We're seeing businesses that come to East Hampton who have face-forward shops on Union Street, Cottage Street, Main Street are staying true to keeping the doors open, to what they want to be selling, how they approach the market. But there are empty storefronts. And I think that goes to the switch of economy, but also it's a generational a shift, big time. What interests me about Jim's article and kind of like light bulbed in my head with the frame shop was our Mill District, Pleasant Street Mill District, where there are hundreds of small businesses in there. I have no idea who's there.
She's on the second floor, and that was one of her challenges that she pointed out. And it was a great flag for me, too, because as I scroll, see, like, there you go, I'm on my phone shopping. As I poke through downtown Northampton, I've never once gone to a second floor store. Shame on me.
Exactly. There are services, there are stores, business people in the mills in my very own city that I would not know are there. And they do fine, but I think there's a lesson to be learned from that article. That
Look up from your phones and look at the second story.
Absolutely.
I found her only because photographer Don Trieger, who I was working on the story with, wanted to go up into her window to shoot down at the
busy
intersection.
street. Yeah. Well, happy accidents, right? Alden, when you're not wearing your NEPM hat, you are a small business owner, not a brick and mortar type of joint, as I understand it. What did you think when you read this story?
I thought it was pretty compelling. I mean, I think that, what Jim points out about e-commerce is still having a huge impact on a place like downtown Northampton, and the same people who often want to have a charming downtown where they live also then go home and buy the shoes on Amazon. I mean, that shoe store that we used to be on Main Street in Northampton, I mean, I really doubt another shoe store is going to go in there. So what's the business?
Ted's Boots.
Yeah. Like, what's the business that's going to go in there? It's not going to be another apparel store, I doubt.
Mayor LaChapelle.
What comes to mind, and maybe it's a way forward here, is Michelle Worth over at Mercedes-Benz. She and her husband have been really curating an online local feel-good shop that pulls people to the physical location or can help get those entrepreneurs' products to folks who don't look up from their phone. And I just wonder if something collective, collaborative, that really has some marketing punch behind it is a part of the solution. I would also love to see the state and federal government come in with subsidies for seasoned towns in the Pioneer Valley that, I don't think Ted's Boot Shop is never coming back. There's not, a successor to that. But there's some really amazing shoemakers in the Valley. And if their work could come to a main street and be subsidized rent-wise, I think that is another possible solution.
And that call for funding kind of aligns with Mass Inc.'s call earlier this spring saying really the state needs to step up and bring $500 million to help develop things in the Pioneer Valley, business in the Pioneer Valley. And among that was $90 million for property development. So, go ahead, Jim.
Mayor, how big are the two P issues, parking and panhandling?
So Gosh, Jim. So parking in East Hampton is, a little mythical. We have plenty of parking spaces. The way we get people to those parking spaces is extremely poor. I'm hoping to have a solution or a plan in the next 3 months. And panhandling in East Hampton isn't really a thing. And I will say that I think the biggest part of that is we have no transportation in or out of our city. That's affordable and easy. And I know that maybe sounds contradictory, but that's the truth. We also don't have a lot of services that people would access of any social demographic area. So, I mean, the panhandling issue is a non sequitur here, but that's why no public transportation.
But Jim, you also took a look this week beyond small business at what has become a huge business in our country, artificial intelligence. AI development, might be something that doesn't quite leap to mind yet, but in your reporting, one small indicator could come from the results of a summer incubator fellowship at Western New England University, which you reported got a bit of cash from Mass Mutual this week, $75,000, hoping to bridge Western Mass, Cambridge, and Boston. How are they proposing to do that with this?
They recruit college students locally in Worcester Polytechnic, and it's really geared toward engineers, computer scientists, to get them the business experience of doing an elevator pitch, of working with investors. The goal is partially to develop these apps or ideas into businesses, but also to develop a workforce that places like Mass Mutual can tap into and hire locally good AI minds to develop what they need to develop in their business.
And they're going to be working on this over the summer, and there'll be some kind of presentation of the apps this fall, right? Alden, any AI dreams you're having to help run your small business?
No, but I think if you look at what's Jim talks about the workforce, and I think if you look at why Boston is such a place where companies like Google and Apple have to have a location, it's because Harvard and MIT are there, and that's where like the people they want to hire are there, and you've got to figure out a good workforce out in Western Mass that these companies can hire.
Mayor LaChapelle, thoughts on if AI could be part of the economic development picture here? I mean, manufacturing is one of those things that we talk about occasionally as this sort of afterthought, but it does have a quite strong foothold in Western Mass. Could AI rival manufacturing, you think?
I think there's a possibility. I think we're a long ways from that point. I will say that AI definitely has a part of city government in East Hampton.
In what way?
It allows us to get communication out and also consistency in grant writing and whatnot, that we're on brand.
So
And
using an AI chatbot to help you with that messaging.
we do, yeah. We use it all the time. And what's interesting about the article Jim is talking about, to have local folks working on AI projects, I would hope that it gives somewhat of a local stamp branding to the words that they would use that make sense in the Pioneer Valley. And we've seen really great success in East Hampton. We don't have a comms person, and there are certain words that we use now to describe East Hampton, to describe our philosophy.
That AI helped you to locate?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. As well as first person, not using passive voice. I mean, I write like a lawyer. That does not read well. Also, just to jump in, also authenticity. What we have learned is when our city documents look and sound the same, they come up more in a search as really a government document. And that's a little bit from a session I attended at MMA, but also was just
That's the Mass Municipal Association that leaders often go to.
Yeah, and then Harvard Business School just went to their happiness symposium, which was happy. But they talked about AI and how we can put a message out that is authentic and folks can know that the source is true and not a deep fake.
But to that point, just very quickly, how are you fact-checking the information that the AI is bringing forward to you? Doesn't that add more work?
No, I mean, because we have in my office, I'll write something, I'll make sure that it's on brand using an AI chat box, then my executive assistant reads it. And we often have somebody from internet technology or a third person who knows very little about the subject. And have it either read aloud or they read it for fact-checking and making sure. And I would say that we are more factual in a correct way than we ever have been because in a weird way, it slows us down. Yeah.
Well, you heard it here first. AI at work in East Hampton. All right, I'm going to bring us to my favorite part of the show, predictions, scoops, and praise, where we ask our panel to make a prediction about the news, dish on a story that perhaps they're working on, or heap some praise on a newsworthy nugget that needs to be trumpeted. Jim Kinney, I'll start with you this week.
Springfield Jazz and Roots Festival. Come on down this weekend.
All right, short and sweet. Do you often go to the Jazz Festival?
I've been a couple of times.
And looking forward to it this weekend.
Exactly.
Alden.
I predict I'll be looking into a story on cell phone policies in Western Mass schools in the coming month or so.
And you can hear that here on nepm.org, I assume?
Yeah, that's right.
Mayor LaChapelle, how about you? Prediction, scoop, praise?
Yeah, I predict George Clooney will play Speaker Mike Johnson in the movie about this election cycle. Looking forward to it.
We'll absolutely see. Well, I have a prediction this week. My prediction is that those who wear rain boots and keep an umbrella handy are going to have the best time at the Brimfield Flea Market because the weather is not looking like a friend of those folks who are out there in the middle of Brimfield, those acres and acres and acres of grass and tents where you go hoping to spend $3 on something that's worth $3 million. Yeah. So Brimfield, for those who don't know, is this 3 times a year extravaganza in little tiny Brimfield where you can go and find treasures and a bunch of junk too, depending on which vendor you head to. Has anyone else been to Brimfield?
Yeah. We always end up sending a photographer and stuff and always end up getting pictures of like lifeless, headless dolls.
That sounds great.
There is some moderately creepy stuff sometimes. I mean, other people avoid Brimfield at all costs because it makes it a very busy place.
I mean, when you say rain boots and umbrella, what comes to my mind is there will be more deals. There will be fewer people, and people, those vendors want to make sales. So if you're a deal hunter, I would say head that way.
The Rundown anthem is provided by the Lumcrumbs. Our director is Tony Dunn. Our board op is Phil Bishop. Our engineers are Betsy Langto, Bart Rankin, Carter Foster, and Chuck Dubé. Additional team spirit provided by Sam Hudzig and John Sutton. Production support from Ayu Suryawan. I thank our panel, Jim Kinney, Nicole LaChapelle, and Alden Bourne. You can catch The Rundown every Friday at 9 here on NEPM.